of the Carsharing Association, the CSA. And this is, we're having this webinar series. Please mute yourself. Please mute as you come on. So this is our response to COVID-19 to get the car sharing industry and our ecosystem sharing to keep strong together. We want to assist the collective conversation and create a collective response, no matter what kind of an operator you are, on the short term to demonstrate the importance of shared mobility and how we can help in the current situation. Our long-term agenda, of course, and as always, to advance shared mobility and specifically car sharing, because we are the Car Sharing Association, although we have different modes on the webinar today, so welcome. This is not an exclusive member event. This is a public event, so welcome, everyone. We are an industry association, and we are a member organization. We support our operators, membership in their growth, and through their growth, the growth of the whole ecosystem associated with car sharing, and through us all, the decrease in personal use vehicles, and through that many more positive outcomes that we know for health in their cities and their residents. We do this through webinars. We do it through our exclusive library. We have a marquee event, which is our international event, which is always extremely successful. However, we had to cancel, like everyone else, our conference that was going to be held, in May. But we do have new dates, so please mark them in your calendar for April 8th and 9th in Vancouver for next year. So 2021, April 8th and 9th. So yeah, please mark it in your calendars, put it in your budget, and we will see you there. We also are continuing with our Car Sharing City Award, and Sandra Phillips from Move Me. Are you on, Sandra? Sandra from Move Me, are you on? She might not be on.
I don't see her, Pam.
Okay, so we are having we're continuing on with our Car Sharing City Award, because we were going to award this at our conference in May in Vancouver. And we decided to continue on because it's still raising the profile of car sharing and the relationship with the cities. So we have nominations closed yesterday, April 15th. I think we have up towards 30, maybe a little few more than 30 nominations from all over the world. And we have a number of judges that are coming through, and we'll announce the judges on the 28th as well. So mark your calendars for May 28th at 5 p.m. Our next newsletter will be featuring this. And if you're not on our newsletter yet, please go to our car sharing organization's website, carsharing.org, and get on our mailing list so you get their newsletters. So now I would like to introduce you to our speaker and what we're here for. We are going to be talking about, this webinar is about how do we work together to raise the profile of shared mobility and specifically car sharing during this time. Of course, in this short term, we want to use this moment to, as a collective response to engage our city officials and our decision makers to increase awareness about shared mobility, and not only in the short term of how we can help now and assist them in their mobility in their cities right now, but also long term in the future. And so we have asked Tim Papandreou, who is a good friend and a wonderful speaker and just so much experience, to come and talk to us about some of his thoughts. He had a recent article in Forbes magazine, and Tim is with emergingtransport.com. his resume goes on and on and on, but I want to mention a few things. He's the founder of Emerging Transport Advisors, which provides strategic guidance to clients and prepare them to and seize the opportunities that active, shared, electric, and automated disruptions bring to their transport systems and the broader society. He was the San Francisco's Transport Chief Innovation Officer. He worked with previous roles with strategic partnerships with Google X and Waymo. He's just done so much worldwide. He has a strong track record in early trends, and it's just always insightful. So Tim, thank you for coming and speaking with us today.
Oh, you're so welcome, Pam.
All right.
Thank you all for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I hope we can get through this in some discussion as well. So Pam, I'm just going to use my thumb like this to meet next slide. So I'm going to get you to do that.
I can't see you for some reason.
You should be able to see me.
Okay, or just tell me when. If you
No, just use my thumb. Can you see my thumb?
I can't see you for some reason.
Okay. Next slide.
Pam, I'll tell you.
Okay.
You can talk to him, and then I'll tell you when I see his thumb.
Well, Tim
Okay,
can
next
say
slide.
next slide because I don't know why, but my camera viewer detached for some reason. So Tim, just tell me when.
It's all good. It's all good. Everybody, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to go through a few of the things that I've been observing in my work, and hopefully that'll help with the discussion. Not yet.
Yep.
So one thing that I want to do is just start off with some gratitude. I think where a lot of us have been feeling a lot of craziness in the last couple of weeks. So it's always good for me, at least, and I'm hoping for you to open up with some gratitude. I'm grateful for staying safe and healthy. I'm also able to keep working from home, which is really fortunate. And I also want to give gratitude to all the essential workers that are doing all the work they can to support us. And I also want to acknowledge and do my part to help those who've been shut out of the shut-in economy. A lot of people cannot actually work right now. So just it's food for thought as we go through this because it affects a lot of people. So one of the things we can see is that the world has changed. It's not going back to a new normal, and we're living in a really volatile time now without any of the typical indicators. And so if we go to the next slide, Pam.
Yep.
So we've gone from not understanding a lot of these different things to basically live through it. So right now, I mean, this is a very, very prescient photo. It's basically a San Francisco transit bus with a Zoom conference advertisement on it and a person walking by. And that's basically the sign of the times. We've gone from commuting to computing. So most of the people who can work from home are doing so, but the essential workers still have to keep the system moving. So there's a big change. And next slide. And while we couldn't predict this happening so quickly, we've seen a transition in progress for a while now. We've known that people are moving from owning cars and sharing more things and sharing more services, but this COVID situation has thrown everything into fast forward and everything into disarray. And so the things that we thought that were going to be happening in the next 10 years are kind of been happening the next couple of weeks. And so that's basically thrown everything off. And I think that's why we've all been a little caught out. Next slide. All the previous shocks, no, one ahead. Sorry, Pam, I'm going too fast. Yep, stay there. While, all the previous shocks to our economy are kind of paling in comparison to this. This is basically unprecedented. And the shut-in economy is basically creating a lot of vulnerability for companies, whether you are a public organization or a private organization. There's three really vulnerable areas that I've been trying to help on. Is really on organizational decision making. How do you make decisions and make decisions quickly? The work culture, is it a flexible work culture? If you have a collaborative, flexible work culture, there's opportunities to move around and do certain things. Some companies are moving their staff around. So we've gone from a very centralized system to a very distributed model very quickly, and some organizations are just not prepared for it, others have been, and we're seeing a very different response to those things. And all of this requires some sort of digital supporting infrastructure to maintain work from home, to maintain all these different systems. And there's a lot of companies that were not used to working from home or working remotely, and their digital infrastructure has basically been really stressed. Many public agencies cannot access a lot of the things they could access at the workplace. So even though this is an interesting time, it's really pressing the vulnerabilities of how our economy and also how our organizations are structured and work. So next slide. So the next 120 days are really going to make or break a company's survivability. And we're really in this 3 and 4 month window where the vulnerabilities of the companies are going to become much more apparent. And your company is more vulnerable than you think. I mean, a lot of companies think, oh, we'll just pass through this, but there's a lot of issues that need to be resolved as we move forward. So let's look at the 3 main business models of mobility. You know, these are the real 3 core focus areas that we look at in terms of mobility, and they're very different. There is, I didn't say go yet. So hold on, don't be trigger happy. The 3 business models are basically owning things, writing things, whether you are writing a service or the service is coming to you, and then the unlocking and renting things, which is all the sharings, car, bike, scooter, etc. sharings. But they're very different, and they're very different models. The one on the left has been really subsidized at infinitum. The one in the middle has a mix of subsidies and help, and the one on the right is expected to do all the work on its own, and there's been very little support in the past. And we need to figure out what's the right level of mix for all these 3 things. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, okay. Stay there, Pam. So there's also a reality check that needs to happen right now. You know, we've had a lot of discussion about what is actually sharing and what is the real type of sharing and what's fake sharing. And we're seeing that a lot of the fake sharing stuff are not supporting the goals of cities and the government. They're not supporting all the various goals that we have. And we're seeing them basically fall through. So really, this is the time now to basically have a recalibration, a reality check on like, what is actually sharing? What do we talk about when we say this stuff? And does it actually meet the goals that we wanted to meet ahead? Next slide. And we can't do that without understanding the hidden subsidies. Next slide, Pam. Wonderful, thank you. So I'm getting some slide dancing from Pam. Just press one at a time, please. So the hidden subsidies are really that none of these are working very well. There's a lot of upstream and downstream subsidies from, you know, subsidizing fuel costs, subsidizing the cost of car ownership, subsidizing land use, subsidizing parking, allocating space on the street for primarily car ownership. All these things are causing ricochets in how these business models can actually work. And so, and not only that, some systems are subsidized by public agencies, some are not. Some are subsidized by venture capitalists, some are not. So we've got a very uneven playing field right now, and it's very difficult for any new mobility service to compete with these hidden subsidies, and it makes it very difficult to basically be able to move through it. Add COVID-19 crisis to it, and it's just amplifying all of these problems in plain sight. So next slide, please. So we also need to get real about what business model needs what. The owner business model on the top has been dominated for car ownership, but not any other kind of ownership. Whether it's the fuel, the streets, the parking, etc., it's all dominated for that kind of movement. We need to basically reallocate the space to ensure that the 3 business models actually have the room and the ability to actually work. And that means that for the ownership model, we need to allocate more street space for cycling and for shared mobility services that you actually own yourself, more electrification, more parking for scooters and bikes that actually need parking as well. For the ride services, whether it's public transport or ride services, on-demand transport services, they also need electrification opportunities. They need allocation of space in the street, but they also need dedicated pickup and drop-offs. Without those things, they're not going to work, and this is why they're failing all around us. And then on the rent models, which are all of the things that we care about from the shared mobility side, which is the fleets, they need access to easy charging facilities. They need access to the right-of-way as well, and they also need access for pickup and drop-off points. And more importantly, they need to know exactly where they're supposed to be and where they're not supposed to be. And when you don't do that for them and you don't provide the right of way, they're not going to work because they don't make sense for a lot of people's use cases. Next slide. So we really need to get around this and look at this and understand that we really need a shift of a mindset. This is really the opportunity that we have been given. We've got about 2 or 3 or 4 months before we need to really get our hands around this and start acting on it. And we have the tech and we have the know-how. We just need to change the mindset. We need to figure out some really core functional pieces of this so that we can be less fearful, less siloed, open up more, say yes to trying things, and make stuff happen through prototyping. And if we can do that, we can bet small on some pilots, and then we can see those happen in real time. And I'll show you some examples in a second. Next slide. We also need to look at how we are going to do this, because this is going to require some key phases that I'm not sure every company or organization is actually thinking about. ETA, the company that I founded, this is what we're working on right now with several of our clients, is how to actually move through the key phases and actually make it out of the end and not basically go bankrupt in the process. The first phase is the event trigger. This is basically where you have to shut down. You've been given a shutdown ordinance by a government entity, and you have to figure out how to go from a distributed network or workplace to a centralized system to a distributed system, but still be connected. So there's a high dependence on the company's IT infrastructure. If it's very vulnerable and it's unstable, then that makes it really tricky. The next phase is the peak. This is when the situation is peaked. You need to think about triaging all your operations. Do you pause? Do you focus on specific things? Do you focus on customer support and community service? Do you retrain and redeploy and retool certain products and services? A lot of staff that were in certain functions now are just focusing on emergency triage. So it just depends on where you're at and what situation you're in. In the middle of this, we're going to see an opportunity to reformat models and pivot from what we call the shut-in economy. So this shut-in economy requires us to basically stay in place. But there's opportunities to test, update, and validate business model ideas. Are there new use cases you can try out? Are there other ways to keep the systems going while figuring out what is the recovery step to actually move forward? And in recovery phase, this is where you start reintegrating back into the real world while probably keeping most of your systems virtual, because everything is not ready to go on like a switch. It's going to be a slow phase of opportunities and movement. And then the long-term phase, how do we actually move through this? Because it'll be a transition and we're not sure what the outcome is. We're not sure what the end point looks like, but we know that we'll be continually transitioning. So the new models will need to be centered around customer service and digital transformation. And a lot of the things that you're doing right now or were doing pre-COVID may not be what you'll be doing in the future. So we're going to see a lot of fits and starts with this. So next slide, please. So as we do this, governments of all types are really looking at what are the key guardrails they'll be looking at moving forward. You know, making sure that things are safe, making sure that things are equitable, making sure that things are interconnected, that they're affordable, and that they're sustainable, so that they're both financially sustainable, but also meet a lot of our climate goals as well. And how does your service actually fit into that? Next slide, please. And we've seen so many examples of cities and governments of all types really opening up and saying, yes, we're going to try things. In the last couple of weeks, we've got over 100 different types of opportunities that are popping up just in North America on let's try something different. Let's open up these streets. Let's dedicate spaces. Let's trial certain services. Let's figure out how to do different reallocation of the right-of-way. All the things that were taking months and years of deliberation are now happening in days and weeks. So we know we can do it. We just need to figure out what are the blocks to get us there and how we come together and figure out the right ways to do it. Next slide, please. And so I think it's important to look at the new partnerships that are going to be able to form right now. Right now, we all need to get together and figure this out. We need to have a moment where we really look at this from a perspective of how can we actually do this together. There is no way we can do this on our own, and there's no way that you can do it in a vacuum. So how do we work together? and how do we get this working so that we all can benefit from it? And I think that's a really, really key opportunity here. And thing is, like, looking at the really solid case studies of success. Every single use case has something else that looks like it. You want to talk about your story right now. Telling your story is really important. Get them to be curious. What did this customer do? How did they benefit? How do we work with this? And in car sharing right now, it seems to me that we're shifting from a passenger-based service to an essential worker needs service. And this is an opportunity to be really thinking overtime, like working overtime on how do we get those in place. If there is a misunderstanding that you've had in the past, it's time to do a mea culpa and figure out how to move forward. Municipal workers, transit drivers, some of them need reliable access to cars right now. They don't have them. So how can you provide those services to them? Delivery drivers who need to deliver things may not have good working condition cars or need a bike or access to a scooter. How can you offer those and be part of that opportunity? We've seen some medical deliveries that are needed from hospitals. Maybe they can utilize your fleet. Any of the service cuts with transit right now, if there's missing gaps in the system, can cars, bikes, or scooters in the sharing system offer those opportunities? These are all tangible opportunities that we can look at in terms of making sure that we're really working together on filling the need right now while learning about new opportunities in the future. Next slide, please. And so really, this is, as Pam opened up with, this is our opportunity. It really is our opportunity. We can seize this moment. It is a crisis, yes. There are huge problems right now with even figuring out if we have payroll for the next 2 or 3 months. All those things are real. But this is an opportunity to come together and do a bit of a reboot 2.0 and think about, what are you offering? What is the value of what you're offering? And how does it actually fit in the overall process of actually restoring and recovering with a more sustainable mobility system? We need to do very quick things. We need to reallocate space on our transit and on our road networks. We need to clean up some policies that are exacerbating these hidden subsidies. That's not one person's job. It's all of our jobs to do that. But it's also your moment to tell your story and to articulate it clearly and succinctly about how you are part of the solution. Because if you don't, you're going to be forgotten about, or even worse, you're going to be shut out of this phase. So all the barriers of implementing and all the barriers of actually coordinating are basically gone. So there's really no excuse right now. And the question I have for you all to begin that discussion is, what are we waiting for? So I'll close it down.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Tim. I just want to let you know that I don't know why, but I don't seem to have the chat. I can't somehow put it in. Oh, I can now. Okay, never mind. All right, so we're going to open up the conversation, but before we do that, David, are you online? David Holzer?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. I would like you to talk about the COVID task force, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we have a group of people chaired by Sandra Phillips of Move Me. Pam is also on it, and I think a couple people on the call are here. Have set up a bit of a COVID-19 shared mobility task force with the aim of sort of looking at what shared mobility operators and people in the shared mobility space need during this COVID-19 situation, trying to share best practices, trying to help with any maybe legal issues as you try to pivot your business, maybe offer and delivery, government relations, some ideas around what you should be saying to cities. As we come through COVID-19, there is going to be a little bit of anxiety with people using transit, and it really could push people towards, maybe car ownership. As Tim said, it's super heavily subsidized. Access to capital is going to be very easy to buy a car, and insurance rates are going down. So we'll see a lot of these efforts, and it is the safety, the psychological safety. So where does shared mobility play a role? How can we promote shared mobility is part of what the task force is looking at. What can we do for you guys? So we're so kind of in the initial phases. We've only had 2 meetings, so we're looking for some ideas from operators such as yourselves out there, as to what you need, what we could do for everyone, and we're encouraging you guys to send us some of your ideas of what would be helpful. That way we can start to help you. We have assembled a panel of some pretty great people that have a lot of expertise in this that can start to assemble. So one of the things we'll start to do is the shared resources and best practices, and we'll try and showcase different governments and what they've been doing. Different success stories, silver linings of COVID-19, and then also just try to support you guys as you work through this. So, Pam, I hope that is succinct enough for you. I don't want to take up too much time.
No, that's wonderful. And as you said, we are just still getting going. We're hoping to bring a couple of tools next week. Hopefully we'll be able to announce them. But what my suggestion would be right now is to go to the moveme.net website and check out who's on the task force and email the task force at taskforce@moveme.net to with any kind of requests or thoughts around the task force. And so, Malika, are you there?
I am.
Can you talk a little bit about one of the tools that we've going to be using with the task force?
Sure. So
Yeah.
for those of you who don't know, I'm Malika. I'm with Wonder Mobility, and I'm part of the task force. And in the spirit of this task force and trying to think about how we can help operators and others who really need to use mobility the most, we came up with this dashboard called weallmove.co. And essentially, it's just something that we developed. It's not necessarily a Wonder thing. It's more of an aggregator for all operators globally, for those who need to get around to be able to see what's available to them. So just as an example, last week, I have some stats. Last week, we had 30 cities and 50 countries as of Friday. And as of today, we have 109 cities and 29 countries with different mobility providers and services available on the site. And basically, if you are a car share operator who is operating in this time and providing services for like healthcare and others, you can put it on our site or send me an email. It's just malika.jahangiri@wondermobility.com. I'll put you in touch with the right people. We will put it on the dashboard, and if people can see what's available to them, they will actually click and it'll go directly to you. And we've actually got a lot of feedback from operators and also users who have come and said like, oh, I heard about this from another nurse who said this is a good place to kind of find what services are available to us. So we encourage you to put whatever you're doing on the platform so we can get as much reach as possible.
So thank you. But what I really like about this is that users can use it as well as operators can look at what other people are doing and what innovations that they have come up with, because there's a way in which you can see what people are doing. And is there a way to add what they're doing to it as well, Malika?
What operators are doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they send us an email, or they can do an intake form on the site,
Okay,
it's
good.
just weallmove.co. And it'll go directly to our marketing team and say, this is what I'm doing. And then they will reach out just asking for your logo, and we'll put it up very quickly. And we have really good sponsors like Hertz and Allianz and ShareNow and pretty much everyone, Daimler, Six, who are all participating and sharing what they're doing in this space. So we hope that you also consider joining.
So weallmove.co.co?
Yes.
Okay, I just put that in the chat for everybody.
Okay, cool. I didn't know if the chat was fixed yet. Otherwise, I could put it in there too.
Yeah. Okay, so those are some of the things that are responses to COVID and to operators, and that combined with Tim's presentation, I'd like to start a conversation with people right now. If you might have a question for Tim, or if you have a comment or a suggestion around, again, the theme is how do we work together to raise the profile of shared mobility and specifically car sharing at this time. So if you have a comment or a question, please unmute yourself and do it, because I don't seem to be able to grab people.
I was going to suggest I put it in chat form first, Pam,
Okay, you want to put it in chat then? Can people use the chat?
so we can track it.
Okay, there are 50 people on. So does anybody have any comments on what Tim said or any questions for Tim? I have a question for Tim. Tim, so are you suggesting, one of the things that you said is look, if there's any mea culpas or anything like that, were you specifically kind of like asking people or suggesting people to go to their cities at this time and ask for a conversation about shared mobility and what they can do for their cities at this time, and can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so right now, a lot of the city staff that were doing regular administrative work are actually now doing emergency services work, whether they're bagging food at food banks or that they're helping with the COVID testing centers, all of these different things. Everybody's basically been moved around. And so there's a lot of restaurants, for example, or grocery stores that need safe distancing, they need some work around them, they need those allocation of space around them. But city staff can't just do this all themselves. So if there's anything that you know, or is there anything that you can actually do to help, this is your time to reach out to your city staff, whether it's the director of transport or the staff of the transport agency that you've got existing contacts with, and saying, here is our services, this is what we can offer. Do you need this? Are there any staff that need access to vehicles? Do you want to use our vehicles? Like, these are the conversations that you can have to get that understanding and awareness of A, you're around, B, you exist, and C, you want to help. And if all they do is respond to you and say, look, we've got it right now, or we have to focus on X, Y, and Z, at least you know, right? But this idea of wondering, like, why aren't they talking to us? I wouldn't do any of that. Like, why aren't they reaching out to me? You need to reach out to them because they're in crisis mode right now.
Right.
So, and if you can offer those things, I said a mea culpa because some folks in the shared mobility space have done some very inadvisable things with cities. This is your time to basically say, we're sorry, but we've got some services here. Let's actually work together and figure out how we can work with you. Other providers have had pretty good relations with cities, and they can even further bolster them as well. So, it's an opportunity to start the engagement.
Yeah, so if you haven't, then do it. If you already have, then deepen the relationship with your city staff.
Right.
So there's a question from Jeremy. Anything that we can do to help if we are at home?
So one of the things that I've been asking around is like, what can we actually do? And the first thing you can do is stay at home. That's the best thing you can do, because if we all stay at home, this thing will basically be resolved with much faster than if we all go out there trying to help. The second thing you can do is actually ask, is there anything I can do to help? And either ask your community, ask the people around you that you know, or ask your actual mobility community, what can you do to help? Some people want people like me to get on webinars. Like Pam said, I need your help on this webinar. Okay, that's what I can do to help right now. There are other things I can do for the essential workers that I'm helping out with, getting them access to free deliveries for their groceries. There are people I know in my community who are not computer savvy or have got digital literacy issues, and so helping them connect with the things that I know. So whatever you can do right now, it's really about feeling that you're actually participating and that you're contributing. But your number one thing I've been told over and over again is stay home.
Yeah, and I also agree with you. And I think also if you want to do something in relating to shared mobility, phone or email your counselors of whoever the decision makers are at your city, and talk about or just give them a heads up. You say, look, what about car sharing? What about your micro mobility? Or what are you doing for the future? I like the streets the way they are. How can you keep them this way? Just encourage your decision makers to take note of what's going on. and to call their micromobility or their car sharing organizations to see what they can do. So encourage your decision makers.
Right. Ellen's question.
Ellen,
I
yeah,
can just,
go
yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
So on Ellen's question, so there's a lot of testing right now with shared mobility providers of different use cases. Many have shifted to deliveries. Many are discussing ways to work with medical services that they hadn't really done before. So there's even an autonomous vehicle pilot in Jacksonville that is literally moving medical supplies from one hospital to a pickup center so that nobody's in there. The idea of like contactless services where it's touch-free, that will become the norm. So the more you can look at ways to look at use cases where you can be more touch-free, the better. There's a curbside delivery and curbside pickup opportunities right now for some shared mobility providers who are figuring out ways to create these safer lockers at curbside so that the drivers who are really concerned, by the way, those who work for the delivery services, whether it's Instacart, Postmates, DoorDash, etc., or Deliveroo, they're getting concerned. They're like, I'm very vulnerable. I'm picking things up and I'm dropping things off at people's houses. So if we can make it all touch-free, there's a real big chance that this thing will be useful, because one thing that we didn't talk about is our supply chain is quite vulnerable. And if certain people walk off the job, that is actually a big impact to us all around. Mm-hmm. So they're just some of the few examples, but I have a whole ton, but for the interest of time, I'll move through some of these questions.
Right, and I encourage them to go to the weallmove.co, and they'll see lots of examples of what people are doing.
Yeah.
And I'll continue to share every week, sorry, Tim, every week what we're hearing on the ground from our customers and others that they're doing that's helpful. I think what's really interesting for us, Pam, is that there's all these interesting questions that are in the chat, which we might want to take back with us to our task force and maybe find a way to incorporate it in our newsletter or something, or maybe more for Sandra, who's on the line now, to think about these questions.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's good.
Keep going.
Kootenays, we're anticipating a boom as things open up. Is this realistic? What strategies can be used to optimize potential boom? I'm not sure we're going to anticipating a potential boom as things open up. I think as we phase in, the shelter-in-place ordinances will be in effect for a while. The thing that I've been hearing is that they're going to have a very phased approach. At least the smarter governments are doing it that way. No comments there. And we're going to see a phased approach. It could be a realization that, as the previous presentation that I've shown, is that people are going to be very specific and fearful about being in confined spaces for a long duration of time without certain protections. So the idea that you can move around in a way that's safe, affordable, and comfortable is going to be the default with a private passenger vehicle. But many people in cities don't actually have access to a private passenger vehicle. They don't want to have access to one, or it's going to be very difficult to have one. Yeah. That's going to be a challenge for public transit, where they're going to have a capacity issue because they cannot have a certain amount of people in the bus, but they can't run their services with this massive hemorrhage of resource that they've seen right now. Same thing with shared mobility. How do we get people around that want to use this? So whether it's a bicycle or electric bicycle, whether you own it, whether you share it or you ride it, all those things are going to be opportunities, but they're also going to come with big barriers, specifically around sanitation and keeping things, keeping the perception that it's actually safe to use. So really have to think about that in terms of as we move forward. The next question on EVs. EVs are on their long-term trajectory. They're not going to change. There may be a short-term blip with this, but the writing's on the wall. We're transitioning to electric vehicles, and whether it's going to happen in 2 years, 5 years, or 9 years, in that long-term arc that's moving forward. Having said that, though, because oil is so underpriced right now, and it's going to be underpriced for a while, there may be a blip where people who can afford to use a car will use it. Many of the people who take public transport right now, up until this point, that were commuting during the peak periods, they have access to a car anyway, and so they'll may and likely shift to using their car. But it depends on the city that they're in. If the city doesn't have free parking everywhere, that's a challenge. The decision why you drive is usually because there's free parking on both ends of the trip. And if you don't have that opportunity, you're going to think about something else. The challenge we have is a lot of these suburban cities in North America specifically that don't have good options and don't have good opportunities. People are going to feel a little stuck. And so we're going to have to really think about that through, and EVs will just be part of that broader conversation. Mike's question on how do you see car sharing companies and transit systems giving customers a sense of safety and confidence and vision about their health when using a shared service? Yeah, I think we covered a little bit of that before, but it's really about a new service layer, a new service level agreement, like disinfecting our facilities, disinfecting our vehicles, kind of having certifications that these are clean and certified. I mean, these are really going to be things that people are going to be looking at least for the couple of months when we get a clear signal that we can start going back into the real world. I think apprehension is going to be justified and right. And so really think about, do we stay with the public or do we focus on essential workers and on other providers to keep those opportunities going? I mean, I really don't have the answer for you, but we will have to think about it. You cannot PR your way out of this. You either have a certified, clean, disinfected service or you don't. And people are not going to risk it. So it's just one of those things. Kudne Kashi want to comment on how they're working with city staff. Do you want to hear the comment first, Pam?
Yeah, let's do that. Are you there, Kutni?
I am, yes. Yeah, just as that came up, we were actually we are lucky enough to have one of our board members on our city staff, and so the connection was there, and they're using our vehicles to move vulnerable people of the vulnerable population, homeless, and yeah, mostly the homeless population, that if they show signs of infection, that they'll move them to a secure location, and they'll be using our vehicles to do that. So they're going to be taking a couple of vehicles on full time to do those kind of things. And it's like a subgroup of the city and emergency planning group that is formed with a bunch of organizations. So it's not necessarily a direct line from the city, but it's the subgroup that's formed in response. And we're happy that they thought of us and that we had that connection. Those links already there for them to be directed towards us.
Well, that's another great idea.
Brilliant.
If there's something in your city that somebody has, you know, a subcommittee for COVID, then make yourself known to them as well. Okay, next one.
Yeah, I think, I was going to say, before I get to the next one, I think it's really important what Ken was saying. Don't be offended if the response from the city is, we can't talk to you right now. We're done. We are so in triage mode. That's not, we don't like you. It's like, we're busy, right? And if they're busy, they're busy. Most of them, though, are going to say, what can you help us with? Here's what we need. So maybe the question is, ask them, what are their immediate pain points right now? And is there any of those pain points that you can help with? And then say, we can help with this one. And we'll take care of all the background stuff to get it going. We're not going to just say, here, like, talk to us. So there's ways you can actually engage with them right now to basically be useful. And being useful is really important at this point.
We also reached out directly to our hospital foundation, who's helping to spread the word amongst hospital staff of any level that may need transportation. So that's another line that we went with.
Yeah, exactly. Any of the verticals in your region that would be an opportunity to work with, I suggest you think about school districts. Even though they don't have school right now, there's still a lot of essential workers having to take care of the buildings, etc. Anybody that basically is missing out from the massive service cuts in transit that needs to get around, especially if they're like overnight staff, etc. These might be small business commissions you can reach out to, the economic development corporations of your regions. Any of those opportunities are places you can reach out to and say, hey, we've got a dormant fleet right now. We would be happy to have you use it for whatever you need to use it for. And if they can pay, even better, but if not, get it out there right now to help. Philippe asked a question about venture capital.
Just really quickly, can you please also put this on the weallmove.co, like what you're doing? Because then maybe there's others who are looking for exactly that. This is totally up the alley of what we're doing. Yeah. All right, Tam, go. It's all back to you.
Okay, no worries. So Philippe Christ asked, he's seeing early signs coming from Asia that venture capital is shutting off the spigots due to extreme uncertainty around sharing models. This will likely be mirrored by developments in venture capital in markets in Europe and North America. What will replace the capital for the sharing economy? You know, it's a really good question. I think we are kind of seeing the signs that in a high booming economic time, shared mobility was getting its comeuppance, and now it's starting to see things. But even during that time, the business models were really fragmented, fractured, and had a lot of problems. And the unit economics, the basics of shared mobility, because they're in this background of all these hidden subsidies, are really difficult. So frankly, the way forward is going to be tough for people to see this, but we're going to need to figure out a way to have a shared partnership and a shared subsidy model with the government. If these services truly do meet the needs of the region with reducing vehicle miles traveled, reducing car ownership, reducing congestion, improving air quality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then why are they any different than the subsidized modes that the government's subsidizing right now, whether it's public transport or even bike shares? So there's a bit of a cultural mind shift that has to happen as well here. Unfortunately, I used to work for a city, so I can say this. The culture is, if it's not invented here, we don't want to know about it. And, you know, we really need to change that conversation of there are specific problem sets we have, and if you can be part of the solution, you should be part of the solution. If we need to think about cross subsidies, then we need to think about that. And that's why I use that word very, very carefully, because taxes are things, taxes are behaviors we don't want to see. We get taxed on things. Subsidies are behaviors we want to see. And we're taxing potentially good shared mobility services and subsidizing potential and known bad things in our transport system. And we need to flip that. So this is a much bigger discussion than just about venture capital. It's about how is government really allocating the public domain, and what kind of way are they looking at public service? Okay, so Salar, what ways do you think there strike a balance between personal hygiene cares and long-term community preferences are essential? Yeah, I mean, we've seen shocks like this before, where the first 3 months, people are absolutely changing their behavior, and then slowly, as we see signs of safety and security and convenience, we start moving in that direction. We also see signs of shocks that basically stay with us. You know, unfortunately, the events of 9/11 changed flying for everybody. You know, so that became the new normal, and we are probably not ever going to look back. There may be new things that come up like that I don't want to pontificate about, but a lot of discussion about, you know, social tracking and digital surveillance and all these different things, which may be the case, and maybe we need certification on certain things as well. So it's going to be a wait and see. There really is no way to talk about that right now, other than knowing that if your services are touchless and are touch-free, people are most likely going to be moving towards those things than the things that require constant hand touching across the entire process. Next one, what ways do you think are there to, let me say that. Is there a way to share people's cleaning? Yeah, so yeah, I think let's ask the community to share their cleaning and disinfecting practices. A lot of protocols have been developed by hospitals. They have some very good protocols to follow, but there's also some ISO standards on hygiene and sanitation, so you can look at those. But we can definitely follow up with that.
Yeah, and we have on our last 2 webinars that was really specifically about, like, how are you operating now? And so there's lots of information in our first 2 webinars, and those are on our website, so you can go back to take a look at those.
Yeah, no, these are really good questions.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, any other comments?
Any other questions or comments? You can just unmute and or put them in the chat so we have the record of them.
Oh, here we go. Mohammed's got a question: is how a car sharing startup reacts to this crisis? What type of pivots do you recommend? You know, I think it's a really good question. You know, depending on the size of your fleet and the size of your service, whether you have a car sharing fleet, a scooter fleet, or a bike sharing fleet, whatever the fleet is, fleets are expensive. So you have some really hard decisions of, do you just pause, stop right now, don't put the fleet dormant? Do you engage in some sort of essential service where you can provide your fleet for essential services? Is it worth your while to do that? Is it more pain to do that than it is actually worth the benefit? And you have to ask yourself a really tough question of, is this a PR move to become more visible, or do you genuinely want to be part of this solution? Because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of retooling. It's a lot of reorganizing. It's a lot of prep. I'm helping some companies basically retool right now, and it's really, really stressful. So because we're not all working together in one site, we can't do this quick collaboration. We have to do it all through video chat, etc. So think about that before you make any of those moves, and may it be more realistic to just go on pause for a while. I mean, I don't know your situation, but these are the kinds of things that people are thinking about. And if you do decide to go the essential worker or the essential service route, what are you willing to actually do in that? And how much of it are you going to volunteer your fleet? Do you actually need to get paid something? What does that minimum look like? And these are some of the basics that you'll be thinking about.
Okay, we have time for one more question or comment. Anybody? Oh, so Kootenai also says she's in a small fleet. So excellent. I love it. We're already sharing.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I think it is really important that we kind of like break the silos. This is not about, is car sharing better than bike sharing, or is scooter better than this or that? Is public transit the right thing? None of these things are wrong or right now. We all need to work together to figure out how we can basically sustain the next 120 days, because they're going to be critical for everybody. Most agencies around the world have a couple of months of payroll in their back pocket for running public transit agencies. That's not long, and many of these small shared mobility providers have probably even less. So if there's ways to work together, I think one of the examples that I've been seeing that's been very interesting is in the city of Madrid, because they spent a lot of work trying to integrate everything together, you can do scooter share, bike share, car share, and transit all in one go. And while we talk about this as mobility as a service, it's not just mobility as a service, it's actually the way of actually physically integrating things together, so we can actually get those pieces put in a place where we are not over the other and making the other one fail. So this is really that opportunity to really have that discussion. Okay, we have one more question, which is, what do you think of a large advertising divided between car sharing of the various countries that explain the advantages of safety at the same time period for transition phase 1 and 2? What do you think of the large advertising divided between car sharing? So Cam, do you understand?
Well, Fabio, I think Fabio is in Italy, and I think what he's saying is what about a macro marketing advertising idea for car sharing amongst countries to show the advantage, or what car sharing has been doing in the COVID, something to raise awareness. Is that right, Fabio?
Yes, Pam, because in Italy we are speaking with all the car sharing of Italy to create one format that is for all, pay from all the car sharing, and at the same time, now we are we think that are arriving in phase 2 after the lockdown, because there are the and we are speaking about this argument about the sanification, about all the operation in one meeting with 20 car sharing or TRT in all part of Italy. Our idea is to create one advertising in television, digital, social, without the name of the car sharing, but about car sharing.
Yeah, so like a macro marketing one. Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm going to just cut you off so I can get Tim's response.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, Pam, that's going to be your organization's opportunity, right? So all work together to basically put a coordinated message across there. Again, what I said at the very beginning, telling your story is really critical right now. What are the other use cases that are similar, and the successes of those use cases in other markets that can be translated to this market, for example? We're not all the same. We're very unique cities, etc. But small cities, medium-sized cities, big cities, rural areas, they have some commonalities with each other, and has something work really well in this area and that area. And I think the task force's site, that's going to help a lot to pull out those key gems and create those key messages. And I think that's probably something that you guys will think about as you move forward. But the time is to do that right now, for sure.
Okay, I'm going to stop it because we only have 1 minute left, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody remembers that we're a member organization, and we have a special offer for being a member for the Carshare Organization Association for 2020. And also to contact us and join our newsletter so you get announcements of our next webinars. And of course, I want to thank Tim Papandreou for coming today on and giving us his insights and just the depth of experience and insights that you have, Tim, has always been such a pleasure for us and always learning. So thank you very much, Tim.
Oh, you're welcome, and I appreciate being asked to be here. Just trying to get the word out as well. I just sent you guys my email address on the chat. If you need anything that you heard that you thought would be useful for your company, organization, if you need that kind of insights and work, then send me a ping so we can get that started.
Okay, Tanya, I'm glad that you were on. Okay, thanks everybody. We'll look for our next newsletter for our next webinar. And if you have any suggestions for another webinar, please contact me at executive-director@carsharing.org. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.